thing.
Sorry, I forgot this. Now please start. So I start with the question again. Right. So the question is, all this travel that has happened, that you saw regarding your past lives, what are the changes that you've received, or what changes that you like recognize personally, professionally, and in your relationship with others and yourself? Yes.
I've been completely transformed, many profound changes, and I'll list a few of them. I'll describe a few of them. I never sought to look into my past. It wasn't a matter of curiosity, who was I before? It was just something that happened organically as I continued my meditation practice. And I would say that my memories first began when I had been meditating for about 10 years in my early 30s. And then as I entered my 40s, and I had been doing a lot of meditation at that time, I began to recount full narratives, but it wasn't just oh, I was this, I was that. I relived the lives. I found myself back in time. So the first thing that happened to me was a dissolving of time. And time is a construct of the human mind. There's no real reality to time. It's what the human mind does so that we have a lineal sort of time frame, this happens and then that happens. But there comes a point when that is dissolved, and I found myself living in multiple eras and hearing conversations, seeing scenes from different time periods. At first, I was just my life just previous to this, where I really relived many of the incidents of that life. And I have to say, it was at first destabilizing. I was a newly divorced, 2 teenage kids, holding down a job, trying to do my meditation practice, and here I am finding myself, in war-torn Europe during the last just World War II. And I'd be in a meeting and I'd be back hearing the sirens. And so it was destabilizing. And I would say to myself, I'm a very grounded person. And so I actually was something of a scientist. I went to the places that I saw, I checked myself out to make sure that it wasn't delusion, that what I was experiencing was real. I did that a lot at the beginning. And then as I sort of began to flow into it and allow it to happen, it was the life just previous, and then the one just previous, and then the one just before that, going back several lifetimes. And what struck me, and this is really was my interest, was understanding the patterns of karma, how it's really one life, and we don't lead multiple lives. It's one life with different chapters. And we begin certain things in one chapter, it's like a grand novel. And the next chapter, we take it to another stage. And then in the next chapter, that may be completed. And so in order to understand your life, you have to see the whole picture. And you can then understand everything about your life. And so my sense of, in the first book where I recount, I think it was 7 lives, at the end of it, I write a poem. It's like, so who am I? Am I this one? Am I that one? Am I that one? I mean, I've been everything. I've been everywhere. I've had all different experiences, rich, poor, this color, this religion, that religion. So who am I? And then I realized, well, another 50 years, I'm not going to be Dena. Dena's just going to be, I'll write a book about Dena. Dena will just be another one of those lives. And so it's like a dream, really. We get so attached to our personality. And yet, in each of the personalities that I've seen, I've recognized something about myself. So, in one life, I was an aspiring dancer. Well, actually, in 2 lives, I was an aspiring dancer, one in India. You haven't read that book. It's Rukmini and the Turning of Time. And then my last birth, I was an aspiring dancer in Russia. And I still love dance. I have no aspirations to be a dancer, but that love for dance has stayed with me. And so I see a little piece of each of the lives within myself. And yet I'm no longer that personality. I had a group from India come see me last week. They had read the Untold story of Sita, and one of them brought her daughter, and she wanted to meet Meenakshi, the servant of Sita. So she came to me and she saw me. She said to her mother, "She's not Indian. She's not Meenakshi. I'm not Meenakshi anymore." You know, it's like that I no longer identify with the personalities that I've been. And yet when I'm writing, I'm fully identified because I go back into that time period, but then I come back to my current life. And so the first profound change that happened to me was the dissolution of time, to realize that there's no ultimate truth to time. And the second thing was identity. Who am I? And of course, that's the ultimate question that we sit with in meditation. Who am I? And I realized that I have affection for all the personalities that I've been and this personality, but it's not who I am. It's not who I'm going to be in the future. So the second thing that happened to me was the concept of space, because I began, you'll meet in the, you're just reading When the Bright Moon Rises. And if you read Rukmini in the Turning of Time, you'll meet this person who I call Satya, who is in another dimension. When we leave this world, okay, we all going to leave this world. We enter another dimension, a subtler dimension of light. So what is the death? Is the death leaving the physical, or is the death being born into the physical, leaving that world of light? We have an existence in that world of light. And so, and there's a book I recently read called The Physics of God by a man named Joseph Selby. And he talks about the cutting edge of modern day physics, which is coming to see, first of all, the non-locality of consciousness. So consciousness is not a creation of the brain. The brain is a creation of consciousness. But also he talks about the energy verse. Instead of calling it the subtle world or the astral world, he calls it the energy verse. And he talks about the physical world as a projection, a holographic projection of this holographic world, the energy of the, of the energy verse, which is what the rishis have said. So modern physics is coming with its own language, with its different language. Instead of talking about celestial worlds, talk about dimensions. Physicists acknowledge that there are many dimensions in our universe. So we know many dimensions. We call it the celestial world, the world of light, the astral, the causal world, many dimensions. But the physical world is a projection of that. So we have a presence in that energy verse, and we are projecting ourselves into the physical world for an experience, of physical embodiment. So what meditation does, and what happened to me, a lot of my experiences, I don't separate my writing experience and my meditation, because often what comes to me is in through my meditation. We can contact that more awakened part of ourselves that is projecting itself into this human embodiment. So that was another realization that came to me, was that why wait until we leave the body to connect with that energy verse, with that world of light? We can connect with it now, and therefore the transition becomes easier. We just leave one place and appear at another. I had a very powerful dream 6 months ago. I was in Japan, and I was at a big Buddhist summit, and I had just been to their new temple, which was gold everywhere, gold, Buddhas, gold ceilings, and there was such light coming through the gold. That night, I had a dream vision where I was seated with a friend of mine, and he was in the process of transition. And I saw his physical form get fainter and fainter and fainter. and I saw him disappear from here and appear someplace else. And I said to myself, oh, that was beautiful. I'm going to do that. And I went into meditation and I waited for my physical form to dissolve. And I waited and I waited and it didn't dissolve. And then I heard a voice that said, your work is not done. When your work is done, you also will disappear from here and appear there.
Mm.
It was a death dream. And so, it happens as you move through life. The early part of life, you're working through a lot from your past. But
Mm.
as you move through life, you're beginning to create your future. You're setting the blueprint that will manifest in the future. And so you're getting closer and closer to that world of light. But why wait? Why not connect with it now? The yogi's goal is to make the conscious transition from
Mm.
here to there.
Mm.
So these are some of the realizations. The change totally changed my relationship with death because I saw it all as one journey, not different lives, one journey.
Mm.
And it changed my concept of space because I realized that we can exist in many places. We do exist in many places at once, and that we exist in many time frames. So the whole physical construct of time, space collapsed. I don't live in that consciousness all the time. I live in that consciousness when I'm writing, when I'm meditating. But when I'm functioning in the world, there's a past, there's a present, and there's a future, and there's a here, and there's a there. We need that in order to function.
Right. So I guess it's so beautiful when you said that. So you are there, like when you go there, you are there, but at the same time, you could develop or you could experientially understand that you are not that. You are not this, you are not that. You are just a continuum, right? And so this detachment, it kind of organically developed, where you don't have to do it, but it just, you know it now that you are not that. So that brings me to this question that, that not, so it also kind of helps us to understand that how much important it is to live with consciousness, like to really understand that what is happening. Like, whatever that we are carrying today, whatever is happening today, there is a past to that. And that's why it is happening. And whatever I'm going to do now, or live now, or think now, or act now, has a effect to that. So it really makes it so important to live consciously and really be in that moment of consciousness, isn't it? I mean, you just can't live blindly or in ignorance.
I think there's the law of cause and effect is like the law of gravity. In the physical structure that we have, everything is energy. Thought is energy, speech is energy, and it has a rebound. So it ripples and has an effect. Nothing just disappears and doesn't have, that's the end of it. Everything we do has an effect. So what we can't control is the conditions that we find ourselves in, because that's all created through this causal relationship. What we can control and what we must control are our reactions, because that determines our future. I think I have realized more and more. I started writing a book called Memories of a Future Life, because just as the past, we can live in the past, we can envision the future, we can be in that future. But we are creating our future. So if we have a certain reaction, it perpetuates this cycle. We react in a certain way to a person or to a set of circumstances. We're perpetuating that cycle. But if we don't react, and it has to be from a very deep place, it can't be a feigned non-reaction. We don't react. We're not perpetuating that. We're not continuing it on. The goal is to take control
Mm.
of our lives, not just to be sort of tossed around through this cause effect. We do this, this happens, we do that, and this happens. Is to take control of the situation by being the witness in a way, watching it without reacting to it. And it's tricky because you want to have discernment. So there are bad people or ignorant people who do bad things in the world. How do we react to that? And we all face this, at a collective level. Our world is it's easier to deal with this on a personal level. Somebody hurts you. Well, they're going to have to learn at some point. You're not going to respond to it. You're not going to get upset by it. You're not going to get angry. You're not going to get hurt. But there are all kinds of conditions in our world that awaken fear in people, that awakened hatred and anger at a collective level. So do we want to participate in that? Or do we want to counter that? Participate in non-fear, non-anger, non-hatred. And we get many opportunities to test ourselves. A friend of mine was going through a very difficult test, and I said to her, physically, she was just having a horrible time. And I said to her, it's a test. She said, but it's so hard. I said, well, if it wasn't hard, it wouldn't be a test. How are we going to react?
Right. So cultivating that practice of being in that witness mode is so important, right? Is what we kind of come on. And when you say that, you are already working on this project of future life, because our response is what is going to build what our future is going to be, because it is all the cycle of cause and effect. So I was to ask you this question later, but now that we are talking about it, if a person who starts working on the future, my question is, but there is a possibility that whatever cause has been already put in action, the effect will happen, right? You cannot erase it just by wanting to manifest that future, but you will have to go through that of redemption, isn't so? Whatever actions which you have taken in the past, that will come to you. You will have to go through it. But by being conscious, you will know now what future you are creating for yourself. Is it what I'm understanding it right?
As you move through your current life, there are aspirations that don't get fulfilled. It happens to everybody, that there are just things you would have liked to have done that you can't do. You can't do everything in one life. There are relationships that don't get resolved, whether they're love relationships or difficult relationships. And you'll have to future to those elements, to those relationships, to those aspirations. And yes, there are things from your past that will emerge, because it's not just your life just previous. I mean, we have a whole past behind us. There are relationships and people that we've interacted with that may yet have to come to fruition. So there are things that we can't see that will appear to us in the future. But again, if you are established in this practice of witnessing and non-reacting, if you're established in that, you'll be able to handle that. But generally, by the end of your life or in the last portion of your life, you can begin to see the blueprint. You can begin to see the general framework of where you're going. You're on the spiritual path, but you've been distracted by family, you've been distracted by work obligations, you haven't been able to devote the energy and attention that you would like for your spiritual path. Well, in the future, you're going to choose a situation for yourself where you are going to be, that's going to be a priority for you. So as you move through life, you had to fulfill certain things. You don't begin life with the same consciousness that you end life. You grow and you learn, especially if you're doing practice or if you have a guide. And so by the latter stage, you begin to see, what you've fulfilled and yet what you would aspire to do in the future.
Right. Thank you. Thank you about that, Dena. And, when you were talking about this collective action and the collective karma, I would want to read you a paragraph from the book, An Untold Story of Sita, which I had made a note of, which reads that the the long withholding of rains had, this is when the Mithilia, there was a drought and the rain was not happening for many years. So the long withholding of rains had altered us to the fact that even if we abided by the laws of the natural world and gave our gratitude, there were others on earth who might behave differently, and all would suffer from their ill acts. When I read this line, I felt it's so profound. At the same time, it is so alarming also. I mean, we are living consciously, but then there are people who don't live consciously, but we all will have to pay for it. Isn't it really? It comes like a jolt, when I think about it. And I want to ask you, like, how do we work around this? I mean, there are so many things happening in the world.
This is one of the inspirations that led me to write this book about the future, which takes place 200 years in the future. I thought to myself, I see a very positive future if I look way ahead. It doesn't mean there aren't going to be challenges in the coming decades, because there has to be, we've entered Dwapara Yuga, where Kali Yuga is behind us, but there's still a lot of mindsets of this unenlightened age, Kali Yuga. And if you, according to my tradition, early decades or centuries of Dwapara Yuga are not very enlightened. They're just early. So, and we know the environmental issues that lie before us. I mean, we've been warned for decades now. When I was young, The Silent Spring, that book came out in the 1950s or 60s, maybe. The Silent Spring. Now, in my part, New York, we've lost half of our birds. So we're living what we've been hearing for decades. But what I believe is, so we're not going to be able to escape certain changes that are going to happen. However, what I do believe, and I think this is why, what I'm inspired by is everywhere I go, I find people who are doing meditation. And why did the masters come in the middle of the last century to spread? Previously, it was so hard to access meditation practices. You had to give up your life, leave your household life before mid-19th century and become a renunciate in order to get the practices. Everyone now has access to meditation, and more people are turning to meditation. More and more people are becoming vegetarian. There is it's not yet enough to affect the collective in terms of a mass change, but I believe by the middle of the century it will be enough. And I think the one factor that's going to help us avoid the worst scenario is meditation. There'll be enough of a spiritual collective that will help us as a human community change course. Now, if you look at the world, it doesn't appear that way, right? We seem to be getting worse with all the conflicts, with the horrendous things that are going on, the suffering, and companies retracting from their environmental commitments. But I look at it as just the last bit of that Kali Yuga consciousness. People are clinging to it, an old way of being. There's always resistance to change, but we have to give birth to a new society. And when I look, this is why I'm writing about not 50 years ahead, but 200 years ahead. I believe 200 years ahead, there will be spiritual collectives. This was my interest in Auroville, and my own guru in the 1930s said the social formation of the future will be these brotherhood communities. He tried to establish one in California in the 1930s and 40s, and he said humanity wasn't ready. So Auroville, which is one of the few that have survived for 50 years, is going through its own turmoil now. Humanity is still not quite ready. We still have egos that are fighting with each other. In other words, one of the shifts, if you look at the Treta Yuga, which was the time of Sita, there was a much stronger sense of the collective good and a much weaker individuality, my needs, my wants, possession. There was no hierarchy, the wealthy and the, I mean, there was just none of that. There weren't slaves, there weren't wars of conquest. Those things were not in the collective consciousness. It was a descending time, and Ravana was inserting, which is why this battle had to take place, was inserting some of these negative traits into the collective because Treta Yuga was coming to an end.
Yes.
Now we're in an ascending, so we're stuck with this selfishness and this competitiveness, which was not there in the higher yugas, and we have to shift to a more cooperative, collaborative mindset, which will increase as we move into the higher ages. And so we're at a transition now. And the only thing that will help us through is meditation and all of the other spiritual aspects of sadhana.
Right. In fact, the very fact that Untold Story of Sita is now received well, and I mean, we are seeing that change in the collective consciousness, like where people are ready to receive the change. People are ready to receive the other perspective about the same thing that they've known. Like, for example, Untold Story of Sita, it brings about a perspective on Sita ji or Sri Ram ji, Ravana, which we were not even aware about. It just unfolds a different perspective to what we have already known of Ramayana. So there is a shift that we are perceiving. In fact, I was going through one of your interview with Patriji, and Patriji said that like the Thousand Seeds of Joy is one of the Bible for PSSM, and Untold Story of Sita is another Bible for PSSM movement. And that's so profound to understand, because yes, there is a shift happening, and then people are ready to receive this information. And that is what even Goddess Mahalakshmi ji said in that channeling that she did, which is documented in Untold in the Thousand Seeds of Joy, that now we will come. Now we will come with our wisdom to express, and people will receive it with grace. So you also feel that, right, Dena, that there is a shift happening now. We are in the transition, but we are also seeing that shift. Slowly from the descent, we are moving now up. The Kali Yuga is going up now, like we are going towards Dwapara. Dena, you are muted. You are muted. Yeah.
Definitely the shift in terms of Rama and Sita. I can't tell you how many people have written to me to thank me for helping them fall in love with Ram again. There's been so many. It's like people, and it was like, how can, I mean, I'm basically, a devotee of Ram and Sita, as you know. But the idea that people would think this of Ram, the man of Dharma, is the most painful to me. And what I say is the story of their lives unfolded during the Treta Yuga. There was no writing. There was no need for writing. It's not that they didn't. It was a more primitive. It was a more enlightened society, and there was a lot of telepathy. There was and memory, but they saw the decline, and so the hermitages were being set up to train students in the Vedas to help retain the knowledge. But Treta Yuga went down to Dwapara Yuga. Many things changed, and then Kali Yuga. That's when patriarchy set in. There was no patriarchy in Treta Yuga. There were women rishis. The women had freedom of movement. There was just no concept of that. And so the way Sita got depicted as a victim came through a different filter, a Kali Yuga filter.
Mm.
And that filter needs to be, she's Narayani. Nothing can happen that's not by her design. And all of the women rishis at that time were working with the male rishis in helping to preserve the consciousness of the higher ages, so that would be in our collective memory. Otherwise, it could all be forgotten. They were helping to preserve the consciousness of the higher ages. They say in Satya Yuga, you didn't even need mantras. It was all just by thought, things could appear.
Yes.
But the mantras came in order to retain that consciousness of the Satya Yuga. All of the things that happened in Treta Yuga was to retain some of the knowledge and consciousness of the Satya Yuga, and so on. Eventually had to get written down, but it was through a much less enlightened filter, a darker filter. So now we're on the other side of that. So we have to reclaim a lot of the consciousness. And what I hope happens in the book is that you can tune into the consciousness of the Treta Yuga. I once asked a yogi, because, so many people say we're still in Kali Yuga, although my lineage is that we're into our Para Yuga. And I asked a yogi about it, and he said, in every yuga, there are people living in Satya Yuga, people living in Kali Yuga. It's an internal reality as well as an external. So let's live in the Satya Yuga or Treta Yuga consciousness.
Within us. Yes, yes. That, in fact, as as we are talking about the shift in this consciousness that we are seeing, which we are perceiving. And I was to come, and one of my friend is already writing that we are also seeing this shift happening in the patriarchy. Like, we have lived patriarchy and we are still living it, but now we are also seeing that people are appreciating the idea of sacred feminine and sacred masculine, and balanced feminine and balanced masculine, and divine feminine and divine masculine. They are opening up to this and they are working towards it. So I guess that itself in a very beautiful shift happening in the society, right? And I guess the book like this, it kind of opens up a new dimension of perceiving things, that, oh, something like this is also possible. This kind of relationship that Ram and Sita shared between each other. What a beautiful relationship that they shared amongst each other. What a beautiful, respectful, mutual uh, uh, mm, masculine and feminine they both had within them, and then they kind of jointly lived with amongst themselves. So when we move towards that, Dina, my question that comes to my mind is that yes, we are shifting. The patriarchy is slowly dissolving, but there are still many who are still stuck in that consciousness of patriarchy system, and we still see a lot of abuse and violence that happens with the women. In my clinic also, I have people who come to me with this kind of issues. My and in one of it as one of your peace movement that you do as Global Peace Initiative, I was reading about it, and you say that one of the way is to I would just read that line, that you need to just bring alive one minute, I just kind of taking care of negative emotions to heal. Like, this is the strategy that you kind of work with, that if you really have to heal this racial differences, or the differences between religious thinking, one of the thing is that taking care of the negative emotions to heal. Now, when we talk about the patriarchy, when we talk about the people, like the female who are still a part of it, what is the strategy that you feel should be useful for them, because they are still there and they are still undergoing that process?
Change happens over decades, not just years. When I look back at my early life, meditation was not mainstream. Certainly not in the West. It was looked upon as a cult, and you had to sort of hide the fact that you were a meditator. Being a vegetarian, I became a vegetarian when I was 18. People thought I was sick, that I had some illness, that I couldn't eat meat. And so I've seen over my lifetime huge, huge changes. And I think will also, but the key is not to fall into anger. Many people around this issue, the male-female relationships, the masculine and feminine relationships, fall into anger or further division. A healing takes place when there is none of that, where there's a feeling of allowing the highest aspect to emerge, and that highest aspect is one of love. I mean, and the other teaching that I received through all my realizations and writings is that the foundation of everything is love. The foundation of the universe is love. What is magnetism? Divine magnetism is love. And so that is the key. And I think it will take a few more decades because people cling to the past, even though the past may have been much less comfortable and less benevolent than now. People still want to go back in time because that's change presents the unknown. So a lot of people, what does it mean to have a balance between the masculine and feminine? To a lot of people, that's threatening because they don't know what it means. You know, are men worry, how are they going to be looked at? Is their role going to be diminished? And, you know, and so, and there are aspects of the whole feminist movement which have been bitter, which have been harsh, and that has repercussions also. And so I think rather than we have to talk about it as the divine feminine, the divine masculine, manifesting the highest levels of that. And I think there's a lot to meditate on. What does that mean? What does the divine feminine energy look like? What does the divine masculine energy look like? They're both founded in love and honoring the other, because I mean, there's Shiva, Shakti, Ram, and Narayana, Narayani. There's they need each other. I'm also working on a book called Sita's Yoga. And in that, it talks about Rama and Sita, how they manifested more than anyone else, because often the avatar doesn't have the companion when the avatar incarnates. But Rama and Sita is the perfect example, unique really in history, of this total complementarianess that they manifest with each other. And I think, you know, we have to go very deep to understand that and to understand. That's why it's so relevant. And I see definitely a resurgence now. You know, people wrote to me and said, what do you think about the temple, the new temple? Well, a temple can be a portal or it can be just a building. It's the consciousness that you bring to it. But there's definitely a resurgence. And I see it in the reception to the book on Sita, a resurgence of the Ram and Sita energy now on the planet. And as I say, Ram and Sita, they're living presences, not historical. Okay, they manifested in history, but living presences who we can access today to help us at this evolutionary moment. Because we are at an evolutionary moment. We're being forced to evolve. It's not a matter of choice. It's a matter of survival. We're being forced to evolve. And that Narayani energy is about evolution, which is why so many of us feel it now.
Thank you. And one of our friend is writing about Shiv Kumarji, that Swami Sri Yukteswara Giriji has mentioned about this yoga. Yes. So in Untold Story of Sita, Dena has touched upon this subject of how Yukteswar Giriji has explained about the different yugas and how the transition from one to another happens. And now where are we? So if you are interested, you can definitely have the book and read that. Then I'll be moving to the next. Now I would take you to the another book which I was reading, My Journey Through the Time. In that book, at one of the place you have mentioned that microcosm reflecting macrocosm, each individual part, each conflict reflects a greater movement of which we are all part. Can you explain this?
So many of us feel, how do we affect the collective, right? What can one person do? I mean, you look at the political situation, you look at the environmental situation, and what can you do? Well, actually, we are an essential part of that collective. And it's something that I've dwelt on. What can I do? Especially the environmental situation hits me very profoundly because of the species, because of our family. They're our kin, and we're destroying them. So I received an answer to this question not long ago. A few years ago, I had been at an environmental conference in Japan where we talked about whales because they hunt whales in Japan, and that's part of their culture. And I had brought somebody from the Caribbean who was very connected to the whale family, and I said, don't criticize, just talk about the consciousness of the whales. I left that meeting and was on my way to the UN climate conference, which was taking place in Poland that year. The night before I arrived at the conference, I had a dream. And in the dream, I was standing in my apartment that overlooks a river, the East River in Manhattan, and a large whale swam up, stopped in front of my building, and we made eye contact. And I said to the whale, "I hear you." There was a transmission that took place. I communicated with the whales. The next day, I was at the UN conference, deciding to go to all the panels about the seas. I said to myself, I think I just promised to represent the whales here. Well, there was not one mention of sea life. It was all about tourist assets and the impact on the human community. It's as if there was no life in the seas. There was no thought about. And so I was very troubled because I said, I can't. What can I do? I can't represent the whales. But I realized what I can do, because since then, every time my eye seems to catch something with the whales about a beaching. I mean, last year, 50 whales made themselves into a circle and then beached on Australia, and which means most of them died. But there were some young ones who didn't die, and the people got them back into the sea. They again made a circle and beached themselves on the shore and died. Well, that was a communication. They were telling us something. This wasn't just a coincidence. They were telling us something. And so I felt it so deeply. And then in my area, New York, 25 whales were killed last summer also through ships and other reasons. And I thought to myself, since that line of communication opened, it never shut down. I feel what the whales are going through. They are intelligent creatures. They know how to communicate telepathically, which very few of us can do. They communicate telepathically, and they are reaching out to humans to convey to humans what they're going through, the plastics that they're injecting, the microplastics that are everywhere. I mean, and plus everything else, when they drill for oil, the sound that they emit, how it impacts the sea life. And so in my small way, I have kept open that line of communication. And there was an article recently about forest bathing as a way to heal the emotions, the fears that we go through. Well, forest bathing can mean connecting with one particular tree and opening up a line of communication with that. It can be anything. It can be sitting and really spending time each day watching birds. It can be anything. But if each one of us did that, we would see a huge change. So this is one way that we all have a responsibility, because what we do affects the collective. And the more of us are doing it. So the most important thing we can do now, I mean, of course, there's the issue of conflict and how we can be part of healing that. But in terms of the natural world, there's a lot that we can do in our own lives that will have a cumulative effect over time.
That's so profound that we cannot just keep thinking that what one I can do. We are all participating in that collective, and we all can become that drop will one day become an ocean, right? So beautiful. So we'll continue, but if if you all have any questions for Dena, please start writing so that we can ask Dena anything coming from you all. And I will move on to my next question that I have. So Dena, in one of in the book where in the life of Thema, where she meets Didi, and there was this beautiful mention that I will read, that where she says that my time with her, like Thema says, was the happiest in my life, because only there I could feel a sense of freedom, of possibility, of being valued with Didi. I was more than just a wife, a mother, a village woman. And I found this line so beautiful because somewhere all of us want, we really seek to feel this, to be validated, this experience that, you are not just what you are in a playing role that you are in, but you are more than that. And this line really touched me very deeply. So I thought when I talk to you, I'll kind of share that line with you, that this is such a beautiful line. And another thing that I wanted to bring today was that, there are so many of us who are meeting today uh, to you. And we are in all ways, in our own individual ways, we are working on ourselves. And sometimes we have this question, how much more I need to do, how much more I have to, go through this. And then there is this line that I come across in one of the book where, it writes that it takes a long, long time for samsara to dissolve. Mayu, it's the life of Mayu in Japan, where there are layers upon layers that must be walked through. It is easy to find peace in monastery, but then we must stop outside. We must step outside, back into the world to see what we have really attained. These are such a beautiful line. I mean, it really kind of validates that we have to just go on and on. I mean, we cannot just ask because the layers are so deep. And we have to delayer, one by one. And then that's how it is for everybody. That's the only way, right, Dina?
When I was young, I used to assess my spiritual progress by my length of meditation. Oh, if I'm meditating 2 hours, I'm doing well. I'm really meditating. I'm progressing. Now I assess it by how I am moment to moment in daily life. If I react to external events, if I get upset, if I get fearful, and there's a lot of causes of things that stimulate that reaction of fear in the world today. And so to me, meditation is only half. The other half is how you react to the conditions that are coming your way. And that's why introspection, reflection, observing yourself is such an important part of sadhana. And so, yeah, whether it's coming out of the monastery or coming off the meditation cushion, I've been astounded by some people who are really regarded as teachers or people who've been doing practice for a long time. And then you see how they are at a certain circumstance in life. And it was like, let me learn this lesson quickly. that the other half is how you are when you're not on the cushion.
Yes.
That's how you really know how
Yes.
your meditation is it's all about transformation, right? Self-transformation. Are you being transformed from the inside out?
True, true. In fact, I learned this that, when we are doing yoga or when we are doing meditation, that 1 hour that we do on that mat is not the real yoga or meditation. It's the rest of the 23 hours that we live. And how do we live that is what our actual test is, you know. So that's such a beautiful thing. And, I came to know about this from my masters, Dr. Newton, Dr. Lakshmi. When they said that there, uh, there are times when we are going through our soul evolution, we want to go to the monastery, we want to take monkhood, but then that is not end. Then one day it comes where, we become bodhisattva. We have to come back to the world. We have to live what we have learned and practice it and put it out to the world and test ourselves. Where are we? And only then the next step is, probably you then move towards the salvation or the liberation. So that is not the end to just, renounce everything and go to the monkhood. No, that's so beautiful. Yes.
I know. I have friends who their line is, "I'm not coming back," and it was like, really? You're not coming back? I mean, who knows whether there's more karma to work through? But on the other hand, even if you freed yourself from that, you're gonna. Don't you have people you love who are still here suffering? I mean, you won't go back for them, for the communities of life. I mean, our goal is to only come back to serve. not to come back to fulfill our personal desires and ambitions, but to come back to serve. That's our goal. To serve all of creation, all of that is, in
Yes,
whatever way, whatever way we can.
yes. And to come to that place in us where even if we are in Kali Yuga, within us we are in Sat Yuga. I think that transition experientially we have to live over here, right? And that's the journey. I know how challenging it is, but that's the journey, and that's fun part also. So now we have questions from the audience. Uh, uh, the question is, in addition to meditation, can you please share what else you feel will help us progress spiritually? I think she's already answered, but yes, if you have further to share.
Well, there are other spiritual practices one can do when you're cooking, when you're doing whatever it is you're doing, which is mantra. Keeping the mind centered on whomever you're, the guru, the divine, Ram, keeping the mind there when you're doing whatever it is you do in your daily life is a way to keep your meditation throughout the day. But again, then at the end of the day, it's really being very watchful over your reactions to circumstances. Did you get angry over something? Did you get fearful over something? Did that desire, greed pop up in you? Oh, I saw something beautiful, I want it. Not to judge it in any way. None of it is about judgment. It's just being watchful, because this is what sort of sets up the pattern of cause and effect, to be watchful.
Yes, 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 so profound. And that is so beautifully revealed in your first book, My Journey Through the Time, where one life and the unleft desire led to the another life where you were born in that life. And it's so beautifully visible to see that how unfulfilled desire gives rise to the next life, because you wanted to live and you left with that unfulfilled desire in few of the lives, right, Dina?
It's true of every one of us that if you look at the whole mosaic or the whole tapestry, it's beautiful. It's
Yes.
really an incredible creation, because things that don't get resolved in one life get resolved later on. Everything gets resolved. You loved somebody, you couldn't be with them. Well, you're going to be with them again. That's going to work itself out at another time. So it's quite beautiful. People who've died, a child who's died, and there was unfinished stuff. Well, there'll be another opportunity to be with that being in a different way. And so it's a beautiful system that's been worked out, this unfolding of karma. It's not, I learned this early on, it's not reward and punishment, which is a very kind of limited way of thinking about karma. It's about awakening, it's about learning. If you don't learn in one opportunity, you'll have another opportunity to learn. It's all about awakening.
Yes, yes. In fact, when we are talking about the shift in the consciousness, we are also learning that karma is no more punishment. I mean, that concept has lived for such a long time. You do this, you create sin. If you don't do, but it's not like that. The karma is not punishment. In few of the religion, they say that somebody's watching you, somebody's watching you. It's not somebody's watching you. You yourself is creating for your own self. So you are the responsible buddy. Nobody else is responsible. And that shifts.
Judging you.
Yes, that shifts. You take the responsibility, whether I want to go ahead with this or not. And if not, then what should I do? It's so beautiful, this shift. Then, Dina, there is one more question from a person that said that, Madam, if time is not real, how it feels like while experiencing this truth? How do you feel when you feel that the time is not real? How is that experience for you?
Well, when I'm writing a book like my last book, To Dance with Dakinis, I was in 12th century Tibet. I was really in 12th century Tibet. I was living that reality. And the challenge that I had early on is to live in multiple realities. In other words, isn't that had difficulty when I first began? As I said, it was a little destabilizing to find myself back in a war from 50, 70 years ago. But I actually find myself, it's almost like time travel. except it's not physical time travel. My body's not traveling, but mentally and emotionally, I'm back in that time period. And so it's no longer destabilizing for me. It gives me much greater insight into history, actually. I mean, I understand history in such a different way now with the periods. I mean, when the bright moon rises, I found myself, that begins in Vedic India with something that occurred that finds its conclusion in 8th century China. But I really found myself as a Taoist. And I had no feelings about China before this, but I came to deeply, I was a Taoist. I still have that Taoist part of me because I had such a profound teacher at that time. And of course, the ultimate is, so I both was remembering Vedic India with the teachings of the rishis and the Taoists, and seeing it was just another language to describe the same thing. So, what it feels like, it's you carried back to another time period, but you see that the eternal truth is one no matter which time period you're in. It's just the cultural manifestations of different places and times.
Thank you for that. Another question that we have is, what could be the meaning of a recurring dream, like a similar pattern?
What's the question?
What could be the meaning of a recurring dream, like a similar pattern? Like in the dreams,
The
a similar pattern is repeating. What does that mean, is the question?
Recurring dreams.
Yes.
Well, recurring dreams is it's definitely have a message. I mean, early on, in my journey through time, I talk about a recurring dream that I had about a house. And soon after I had moved into the house I live in now, there was at the top of the staircase a checkered floor,
Yes.
and that checkered floor, I don't know. There's a in Proust, the French writer Proust, he talks about how eating a madeleine set off memories, set off a whole series of thoughts. Well, that checkered floor, when I first came to see the house before I bought it, that checkered floor set off something in me. And I began to have dreams of a house that I had before my family fled Russia, of a country house that had a checkered floor like that. And I began to have dreams of this house, and it was haunting because I would wake up with such a sadness. And, until I actually began to recall the memories, I didn't know why I'm dreaming of this house. It was always the same house. And so recurring dreams have memories. Sometimes they're symbolic, sometimes they're about a real event from your past. It's different. There's not one explanation. So you have to find for yourself the meaning of that recurring dream.
Yes. And yeah, the dream can be so many things. It can be the past, it can be the message for what is happening in the present, and just showing you the way out, or alarming you, or probably sometimes the future. So yes, thank you. And another question is, what insights can you share with me about Jesus? Any insights about Jesus Christ is the question.
Well, actually, I talk about that in my most recent book, To Dance with Dakinis, because I was not brought up Christian, but I've had some issues around the church that I didn't understand. And in that book, which covers 3 lives, it begins in 12th century Tibet, and then I recall life in medieval France. Where there's stuff around Christianity, which I came to understand the source of my issues around Christianity, but I also came to separate Jesus from Christianity. And currently today, I see Jesus as some people say Kartikeya. I see him as an emanation of Shiva. But each person, it will be different. People have said to me, emanation of Kartikeya, but I do talk about that in To Dance with Dakinis, about coming to terms with that and coming to my own understanding of who Jesus is.
Thank you, Dina. We'll just take the last question. What process do you use to channel the books apart from meditation and dreams?
I don't use any process. It just happens organically. And if it doesn't happen, I don't write. If it happens and it keeps coming, I have to write because I'm getting all the stuff. But there's no specific process. I don't make it happen in any way. Meditation is a key because that's what opens the portal for me. And then it just comes.
All right, friends, and all right, Dina, thank you so much. We are past 10 to 10, and I guess we can just go on and on. Dina, I've just read 2 books of yours, but I have so many things to still ask you. So I'll just probably reach out to you someday. But thank you so much. Thank you so much
Thank you.
to come over here, to be with us, and to share your wisdom and insights from all your travel. And there are so many things that you've shared with us today. But for me, the takeout, one of the takeout is that we are not like we cannot just stop with this thing that what can I do as an individual. We have a role to play, and collectively it is going to make a difference. And second takeout is that the meditation on the cushion is not the end. The real meditation starts when you step out in the world and you see how you are in day-to-day life. So that's such a beautiful, profound insights that we've received. And thank you so much, Dina, for writing all these books for us, and
Thank you.
and being sharing your journey and the beautiful. I mean, I was just thrilled and humbled to understand the work that you are doing with this global initiative, peace initiative for women, which is trying to bridge the gaps that is being created between the religions and the races, and your organization is trying to bridge that gap. Such a profound work which is required in today's world, where division is kind of the central force and people are working on it. You are trying to bridge the gap. So thank you so much for doing all the work that you are. And I also want to thank all the audience for being present today and gracefully receiving the session. So with that, namaste to everybody and good night. Good night. Thank you so much.
One, be well, be
Thank
well. And I hope to see you again.
Yes, Dina, I look forward to. Thank you so much. Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Bye.